This is Corolla Digital.
Welcome to the Dr. Drew Podcast. I'm learning to like that music more and more. I liked it at the beginning. Now I'm like in love with it. What the hell? Good job. Good job, Chris.
Thank you.
Well picked. Today should be an interesting program. I'm going to be joined by Dr. Kevin Sabet. He's the co-founder with Patrick Kennedy. If you remember, he was a senator, I believe, Patrick, or congressman. Patrick Kennedy was a guy that had an addiction problem and a psych problem, took care of his own issues, and then advocated on behalf of those in the system struggling with mental illness. And he always got it. He was very insightful into the shortfalls in our mental health services in this country. So Dr. Sabet, S-A-B-E-T, is co-founder with Patrick Kennedy of Project SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. They can be found at learningaboutsam.org, S-A-M. He's a former senior advisor at the White House in the Obama administration, serves now as the director of the Drug Policy Institute at the University of Florida. He joins us, by the way, you can get him on his website at kevinsabet, SABET.com, and the Twitter handle at kevinsabet. Joins us now from his home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. His new book is called Reefer Sanity. It'll be out this summer. Dr. Sabet, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Drew. It's a pleasure.
So Kevin and I have had a dialogue over the years about what to do with people's feelings about pot and the legalities, and I've always been very interested in Kevin because he's tried to take a very rational, thoughtful, careful view to this. And although people think I have a strong opinion, I don't. And so I'm sort of blowing in the wind a little bit, and Kevin tries to grab me with like a big net and say, look over here where smart people are thinking. And I thought, let's get into it here. Let's really get it flushed out once and for all if we can. So tell us basically what your thinking is and how you think this issue should be approached.
I appreciate that, Dr.
Sure.
Drew, and again, and thanks for the opportunity. Well, I think that, we Americans have been sold a false dichotomy when it comes to marijuana policy. On the one hand, they're being sold, well, we can stick with old failed policies and, has caused a $15 to $30 billion black market that has not reduced availability among kids and that has, caused harms from arrest records due to, criminal records being a blemish on people's prospects to get a job or social assistance. Or on the other hand, if we don't want that, we can try something new and different and innovative and science-based, and that's legalization or now called regulation, taxation and regulation, where we can finally make some have the government make some money on this and fund our schools and marijuana, is it really that bad anyway?
I want to break it down as you walk us through this. What do you mean science-based is taxation and regulation?
Well, I think a lot of people, the argument goes that, hey, the evidence is that we make money off of alcohol and tobacco, taxes. 2/3 of the taxes on a pack of cigarettes go to the government, according to one study. And so, why don't we do this for marijuana? And so, what Patrick, I, and many others are trying to say is, hey, wait a minute, before we go down, right now we're on this 100-mile-per-hour freight train towards legalization. And, before we get there, let's consider all the possible consequences of it, and let's also consider the consequences of our current policy and how our current policy can be definitely made better. But in order to make it better, do we really need to legalize marijuana? Probably not, is what we're saying. And so, when you look at the argument, for example, on taxes, we can just look at alcohol and tobacco for that. Every dollar we get in alcohol and tobacco tax, the government spends 10 in social costs. What are the social costs of marijuana? What will they be under legalization? We don't know, but presumably we'll have an increase in use because marijuana will be cheaper, normalized.
All right, so hold on. Let's again, I want to break down every step of this.
Sure.
So if you're saying, because I want to make sure this is not a spurious argument, so every dollar that the government collects, you're going to blame $10 on alcohol. And I think people would agree that alcohol is a very destructive drug from the standpoint of behavior, mental health, police activity, cancer, liver disease, blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
Would it being illegal make that any different?
Alcohol being illegal?
Yeah. Let's say alcohol illegal. There'd still be huge cost. You know what I mean? The legalization doesn't factor into that cost, does it?
Well, you got to remember, 52% of Americans regularly drink alcohol. 27%, despite our best efforts.
See, my argument would be, well, then let's tax it at $10. Let's
Yeah.
make, let's,
well,
let's,
I agree. We should tax it at 10. In fact, I completely agree that one of the best drug control policies is an alcohol tax policy.
I just left
do.
Utah. I was in Salt Lake City yesterday, and by the way, the people there were glorious, and we loved them. They were wonderful.
Right.
But they have an 800%, I think, markup on their alcohol for that very reason. And guess what? They don't have a huge problem. They have problems.
They don't, but it's still overall federal. The state of Utah and the federal government as well. We do not make money off of taxing these substances. I mean, it just doesn't.
Oh no, I understand it's not a net gain, but at least they discourage the use.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and so
I agree.
Tax more.
And one of the best things, believe it or not, about marijuana prohibition is that marijuana is artificially a lot more expensive than it would be if it were legalized. So
that's interesting.
That's the point.
So
when
that's another
issue.
So it'll be more cost effective.
Well, when something's more illegal, there are risks people take. You've got to pay people for those risks. When it's legal, those risks go away.
What about people, and I know you haven't finished your argument. I'm going to let you finish. I just want to go every step of the way.
Yeah.
What about people that look at prohibition alcohol, the prohibition years, and compare that prohibition to the prohibition of other substances? Is there a correlation there?
Well, there are a couple things that are tricky when you do that. First of all, this is interesting. Alcohol was not actually prohibited during Prohibition. Right. It was technically decriminalized, so you could not sell it, but you could actually possess it. So
you could possess it, and you could use it.
Yeah, you could use it. Yeah. So the smart rich guys, stocked up the day before, and had their, basements flooded, with alcohol, and they were legally able to consume it. So let's be clear on kind of how different the law is. Also, though, let's be clear about the differences in our culture between alcohol and any other illicit drug, including marijuana. I mean, I know that marijuana has been used for thousands of years and in different cultures, et cetera, but it has not been used anywhere near the widespread fashion that alcohol has. I mean, alcohol.
Is that an argument for or against marijuana?
Well, that's an argument that we're stuck with alcohol and we got to make our policies better. I don't think we're stuck with marijuana just quite yet. I mean, I'm from California, maybe parts of California we are, I don't know. But I don't think we're there just quite yet. And so what happened during Prohibition, to answer your question, was that actually we had reductions in alcohol-related health problems and alcohol use. I mean, that did happen. Now, we repealed Prohibition for a host of other reasons because, frankly, the vast majority of Americans wanted to drink, and they drank regularly, and we had an organized crime problem. So, but we got to be very clear. The prohibition argument doesn't quite fit completely with marijuana.
And let's also just take head on that very issue you just brought up, is what to do when the vast majority of people want to do something, and it's a victimless crime. Should they be just allowed to do it?
Well, here's what's vast majority? 7% of Americans regularly smoke marijuana. So we're
true?
not, that is true. Monthly
70%. How much?
7.
Oh, they said 70%.
No, 7.
Whoa, that's good.
About 50% of high school seniors have tried it once, but that's not the vast majority of our population using it at the regularly, which is what we have with alcohol, and we have with tobacco. It's about a quarter of the population using it regularly. So, I wouldn't quite buy into the argument that everybody does it, so we have to. As a democracy, we should just follow that.
What percent occasionally use? Do you have that number?
Well, I mean, so like in the past year, off the top of my head, I think it's closer to about 15 to 20%, but I don't have it. I don't have it off the top of my head.
It's surprising it's that low. I think it's
I know. Okay. Now, again, high school seniors, about half have tried it ever in their life.
Well, and let's be clear, even if it becomes legal, it won't be legal for high school seniors, right?
It won't be. Just like alcohol is not legal for high school seniors, but it's used in a far greater fashion, right? Because it's normalized, easier to get.
You're talking about alcohol. Yeah. Well, I think pot could become that way too, though, right? It becomes normalized, easy to get. It could be in every corner.
And I think that's what we have to be careful of when we think about legalization. Now, again, that doesn't mean that our current policy is perfect. I don't think that somebody who has an arrest record for simple possession should be banned from getting a job in 10 years because they have that mark on their record. I mean, I think we need to be sensible about our...
I'll take here's where I'll take an opinion. I'll take a position. That's scandalous. That's really unfortunate. That's scandalous that we have that policy and that people, for an occasional use of a substance, it's just scandalous. They can get free.
Now, what Project Sam is doing is we want to get those laws off the books, but at the same time, we want to really have a conversation, a rational discussion about legalization before we get there. Because right now, people are being sold that this is going to be the best. The legalization is going to give us revenue to save public schools. It's going to we're medical. It's going to cure cancer, and it's going to also get rid of violence. And they're making some very outlandish claims. The funny thing about prohibition, just real quick, also, I think the reason why it's invoked in this debate is because most Americans hate hate alcohol prohibition. I mean, we all have a negative association with it. We want to drink. It's a quote-unquote failure. We didn't like it. So it's a clever rhetorical tool for legalization advocates to say, oh, this is just like that. Let's repeal it. I think that's really unfortunate.
It is unfortunate that it's framed as such, but I remember maybe 20 years ago, I saw a lecture, an academic lecture by a very thoughtful guy who was comparing, was analyzing the effects of prohibition on culture and use, and all he could conclude was you didn't change use that much, and you just fuel the black market. That's really all you really did. But anyway, that was that. I know that was that.
I don't think
opinion.
It says black and white.
No, I understand.
Cirrhosis of the liver fell out of the top 10 deaths for white males. Organized crime, last time I checked, thrived way after Prohibition and way before Prohibition. So I don't know. Obviously, we're spurred on by it.
Right, but the point is, long before this guy was this is 20 years ago. This guy was arguing for legalization of everything. He was just he was just saying that prohibition doesn't work flat out. And he had an interesting argument. I'm not sure. Yep. You can just look at the Dutch experience, and so it doesn't really work that way.
Right, you got it.
People die a lot when you legalize everything, and you create a certain kind of society that maybe you don't really want.
Yeah,
it's
and the other, the issue with marijuana, I think it's pretty outlandish when people say no one's ever died from marijuana, and so what they mean by that is, for example, no one's had an acute overdose like you can with cocaine or heroin.
Well, no, be fair, like you can with Tylenol and Advil.
Right,
and that's true. That is
true.
Yeah.
But that's also true. Then you could say that about tobacco, right? You can't die from the over intoxication of an immediate.
Right.
You could
or caffeine. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't smoke 10,000 cigarettes at a time, and you're not going to have an overdose.
Right.
I mean, there's no reported. So but there are marijuana-related car crashes. There are links between mental illness and marijuana. There are important links about learning and memory and future IQ with young people using marijuana in their developing brains. So
Kevin, stop there.
This has all been downplayed.
But hang on. But that's the part that drives me freaking out of my mind, is that data is unassailable. It is clear that those things are there. But I've been unable to talk about that because if I talk about that, I'm seen as someone who's trying to vilify cannabis, which I am not.
You're right. And that's the problem with that debate.
It's become so galvanized. That's what I hate about this, that we can't have rational conversations about it because everyone's so – and that's why I kind of went, all right, so illegalize, we'll see what happens. Right. And so in regards to that effect, I mean, if that's what people want, fine, we'll see. There will be some stuff will go down, I promise, because I've seen it. But, okay, that's what you want. How's it going in Colorado? Is that started taking form yet? Do we have any data out of there yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, they're still putting together the regulations. What we're seeing, though, so far, first of all, we have data from drug testing companies that, do drug testing for schools and workplaces. They're showing a sharp increase already in marijuana use since November, even though there's been no regulatory framework. It's simply, basically been that the penalty has been removed while they're figuring things out.
Let me argue that just sort of polemically and say, good. Now we're going to detect the people with really a problem more readily because they don't have to hide, and we can get them some help. And in the meantime, tax them so there's money to pay for their treatment.
Yeah, well, I wish we could say that there's going to be money to pay for their treatment because again, alcohol and tobacco, it doesn't pay for their treatment. We don't have enough alcohol and tobacco treatment, even with all the taxes we have. It's the same kind of argument we heard for the lottery. Remember, the lottery was supposed to save public education, right?
Yes, yeah.
And the last time I checked, our education system was broken. These promises have been, what the interesting thing about alcohol prohibition actually is that one of the reasons why people like William Randolph Hearst and others switched their positions and said, okay, I'm going to go for, I'm going to be okay with repealing prohibition, is that it was promised that there would be no more need for a federal income tax because of the taxes from alcohol. Again, how did that turn out? I mean,
why don't we do that with cannabis? That'd be awesome. Let's just tax it to the point that we don't need federal taxes. Have cannabis support the military. That'd be awesome. Fantastic twist.
Then we'd be encouraging a lot of cannabis use. We got to figure out if we want to do that or not.
Oh my God! So how did this become? You see, although people want to paint me in a corner with this, I don't have strong feelings. I have strong feelings about. My strong feeling is about people who want to stop something. I can't help them. If they don't want to stop something, they should enjoy. But this is a very politically galvanizing thing. Why are you into this topic? This has been something you've been working with for a long time.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, essentially, I grew up in an environment that I thankfully didn't have substances in my family or around me at all.
Where'd you grow up?
But including alcohol. But I saw
Where'd you grow up?
Effects of what's that?
Where'd you grow up?
Anaheim.
Oh, of course, Disneyland, of course.
Yeah, you got it.
No pot there. No one ever gets hungry at Disneyland.
None.
Okay.
I was shielded, I guess, an innocent childhood.
All right.
That was back when Anaheim, Anaheim Hills was like.
I was going to say he was in the hills. He was in Anaheim.
Yeah, but
Hills,
you go to the hills now. I don't recognize it.
Gary
My parents
knows
don't
what
live there
that
anymore. I can't believe they have an In-N-Out burger there now.
Gary knows.
Very bitter.
Just above Tustin there in the hills.
I'm bitter that they didn't have that when or maybe it was better for me that they didn't. But anyhow, and it was, I saw actually in kind of sort of a relatively affluent area, I saw a lot of kids getting in major trouble with alcohol and pot. For example, car-related crashes, them, failing out of school. And these are kids with a lot of disposable income, frankly, with not much parental oversight. Everyone thinks that it's the poor kids that use drugs and abuse alcohol. Actually, the rich kids that have a lot of income and a lot of time on their hands and not that many worries, they have a propensity to use. And I saw that firsthand. And so there was a local community anti-drug coalition in my community that was trying to raise awareness about this. And I basically got involved from there.
So Gary, Chris, this guy, Kevin's been the man. He's been bumming your high ever since you were. Gary's like, I know, man. I was into. Where'd you grow up, Gary? In
Newport.
Newport. So did you feel the effects of Kevin all the way over there, bumming the high in Newport?
I don't want to disparage our guests.
Oh my God, Gary! I need you to get into this conversation. If you have questions, listen. I want to wring this thing like a towel. So if you guys have questions, please ask them. Do you have a question?
No. All
right,
I'm with you.
And put Twitter out for calls and stuff, and let's get people to ask questions because this you don't have time for this conversation in general media, and here we can really kind of dig it through. So what about let me just break down a couple of things. Just again, trying to be as polemic as I can.
Sure.
What about people that go, oh, the rich white guy in the hills? He's going to tell us how to live our lives. He can't possibly understand. Cannabis works for me. I have anxiety. I have stress. I have all these horrible things happen in my family. And pot is the one thing that gets me through my day, makes me feel okay. Why should the rich white guy in the hill tell me how to do that?
Well, now I'm living in I don't know how much better Cambridge is, but okay.
Worse.
I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do about their own behavior. What I'm trying to do is get the risks of marijuana use, which have been completely downplayed in our rush to legalization in the name of revenues and no more violence and cure to cancer. I'm trying to get that information out there in a very sane and rational way. This is not about reefer madness. I'm not talking about, if you smoke pot, you're going to immediately become a cocaine addict and ruin your life. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is it's a gamble. And you should know that it's a gamble. And if you go on the internet or if you're trying to have a discussion about this, you'll never get that idea because it's sort of overrun with this idea that it's a totally harmless drug. I mean, a drug that we know addicts 1 in 6 kids who ever try it, and that's a scientific fact. That's not my opinion.
That seems a little high to me. It does seem high.
Well, it's about 15% if you start when you're an adolescent.
That seems real.
Well, let's just step back to that. The 10% is roughly the number of people with the gene for addiction. And I would say amongst the people with that gene, probably half can get going with pot. Many don't because they find other things they like better. So that number seems high. But anyway, that's the number.
The number is based on the number of people who've tried marijuana and then the number of people now who fall under the DSM-4 criteria. Okay. So you do a probability based on that. Anyway.
That's your number. That's fine. Okay.
So the point is it's a gamble. And so when you look at the recent study, for example, I'm sure you know about it, that came out about IQ in New Zealand. This was a study that probably I would say it's one of the most important studies in all of drug abuse in the last 20 years. And what it essentially said was you had these group of researchers who followed around over 1,000 people born in the years 1970 and 1971 in the 4th largest city in New Zealand called Dunedin. So it's called the Dunedin study. What the Dunedin studies show after following these people for over 40 years is that those who were heavy, persistent cannabis users in adolescence, so before they were 21, they used, a couple of times a week for a couple of years, basically. Even if they abstained when they were adults, by the time they were 38, they had an average of 6 to 8 points fewer IQ points than those who never used. And they controlled for every single variable you could imagine, education, parental, everything.
I would argue two things. I could see that being argued both ways. One is 6 to 8 IQ points. What the hell difference does that make in anybody's functioning? Number one. But number two, that fits with the MRI data. So there probably is something there.
6 to 8 points can take you from the top third to the bottom third of the average IQ if you look at it.
Really?
Possible.
How?
Oh yeah. Yeah, in the IQ scale.
Oh, really? All right.
Yes,
so,
it can.
So it's not just it's not the scale of 100 you're talking about.
No.
All right. Okay. So it's some other scale. All right. So fine. So there's all this data out there, but once again,
but it's not going to happen to everybody.
Well, not only that, the question being is that so immediately that will go then to, well, certainly you could come up with similar data for alcohol and the effects of cigarettes.
Definitely.
And you allow those to be legal, so explain that to me.
Well, that's a different reason. So here's the thing: because your taillight is busted, it doesn't mean that you're going to say, "Oh, I'm going to make sure my brakes get worn out too." I mean, the point is, yes, alcohol is worse. I mean, frankly, alcohol is connected to violence in a way that crack cocaine really isn't.
That's right. So let's spell that out. So you're willing to concede, as I think is categorically the case, alcohol way worse than pot. I mean, just in terms of social costs.
It depends on the domain, but yes, in terms of the social costs, of course it is.
Yeah, way
it's
worse.
Used by 52% of the population, and binge drinkers 15%. It's a huge cost.
Yeah, Adam and I just ran into a guy in Salt Lake City. He'll tell the story in the Adam and Drew podcast. There was only a bar sitting there. We were waiting for a flight at 9:45 in the morning, and this guy, we went in, just hung out. I got a coffee at the Starbucks next door, and drunk guy, one guy in the bar comes up to us, "Hey man, I got to buy you guys a drink." We're like, no, we're fine, we got everything. Becomes belligerent, have to buy you a drink. Adam finally concedes because he has this special scotch he's got to get for him. I pretend to taste it. Adam gives me a load of shit for being a chick and pretending to taste. Of course, this guy escalates more now. Adam downs the scotch. Now the guy goes, "Great, now I need to buy you another drink."
Wow.
And we go, no, come on now. You've gone from making we understand you're a big fan, you want to make this a better experience for us. You're now making this a worse experience for us. And he announces this. You'll hear this, I'm sure, on the Andrew podcast. What percentage of the time do you guys think you're dicks? Ask that question like in earnest. What percentage of the time do you think you guys are dicks? Garen and Chris are actually trying to calculate this, mind you. But okay.
Precise calculation,
and now we're like, oh, come on, man. Mind you, this is the guy we meet in Salt Lake at the baggage claim, too. We have another round with this. You'll have to go to Adam and Drew podcast to hear that story in its complete state.
Wow.
It's a different topic. But alcohol being, point being, this guy would not be nearly so belligerent in real life were he not drinking. He was just hyper vigilant about cues.
And so the question is, why do people drink a lot? And so I would say one of the reasons is it's promoted, commercialized, and normalized in our country where, frankly, advertising rules the day. And so you have liquor companies. They don't make money, Drew, off of, as you know, off of the people. When they say enjoy responsibly in those beer ads, I always laugh because, if every alcohol company wanted everybody to enjoy responsibly, they'd all be out of business. They'd stop
advertising. They'd stop advertising.
That's right. They can't. They only make money from binge drinkers. So they have to encourage, and by the way, that's the same thing with cigarettes. They encourage heavy use. I don't see that as a model for marijuana. I see that we should run from that model.
All right. Now, in all probability, let's graduate now to this part of the conversation. I suspect when cannabis, and Colorado, and Oregon too, I guess, right? It's Oregon and Colorado?
It's Colorado and Washington. Oregon voted it down.
Yeah, Washington, right. And it'll be interesting. I can't wait to see what happens because that will give us our answer. You know what I mean? We'll find out then. Is it good or bad? But listen.
So far, for example, in Colorado, there are these tourism companies, marijuana tourism spurring up. The chamber and the actual groups that do the tourism and business, they don't want them because they're like, this is not our image. We don't want this.
It didn't work.
Not family friendly.
Didn't work in Amsterdam. It was not a good.
Well, look at Venice Beach.
Why?
Well, with medical marijuana.
Oh, when was the last time you were in Venice Beach?
Yeah, I know, with all those marijuana.
Last year.
Yeah, I was talking to Drew. Sorry. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's people out dressed as pot leaves, like trying to get tourists to come in and saying they can get it without a California ID.
No tourists are going to be coming to Venice. I mean, with families, that's just not going to be good for business.
Well, listen. So here's a story of Michael Catherwood, my co-host on Loveline. Right. He is a severe drug addict. Has been in recovery 10 years, doing great. Wow. He's walking his little chihuahuas down the Strand in Venice, and a guy comes out. They have barkers out there dragging you into the clinic. Right. And the guy's like, "Come on, man, you want to get a little high here, man?" And Mike is like, "No, man, you got the wrong guy. Sorry." And he goes, "Oh, you got the little bitch dogs with you. You can't have no cannabis." Starts getting in his face.
Yep.
Mike cold cocked the guy. Knocked him completely to the ground because the guy was like getting on him like, "Oh, you're a little bitch, man. You can't get a little high." Blah, blah, blah. And literally nose to nose with him because he was saying, "Man, no, you got the wrong guy. You got the wrong. Go find somebody else, but not me."
And he's not someone you want to get punched by.
No, Mike.
Who fucks with Mike Catherwood? That guy is jacked.
And he just blew him down. The guy was on the ground dazed, and he took off with his dogs. So that's how bad it is there in Venice. Yeah. And I have a very personal kind of negative feeling about the medicalization of this problem because it's a misappropriation of my profession. It's just awful. Every severe drug addict I have treated since the decriminalization allowing of medical marijuana. Every single severe drug addict I've treated has a marijuana license, a marijuana prescription thing, was barely worked up by a nurse practitioner or something, and told to go have at it, and was extremely deleterious for them. So that's always been very, very personally concerning to me. It really hurt me that my profession was being used to really do a political thing. That I've heard more recently. There's been some rational physicians and medical educators that have gotten into the conversation, and I'm hearing more rational stuff.
AMA, APA, all the major medical groups say that these state-by-state schemes for legalizing smoked marijuana as so-called medicine is not the way to go.
Well, but maybe that's where people get the idea that I'm like the man trying to bum their high with pot. I just don't like my profession being mishandled, misusing. Right. It's bad medicine to give a drug addict drugs. Just bad. But listen, the pain guys do it. Addiction medicine does it with certain. It happens.
Here's what I would say about pain and about these things. We know that marijuana can have medical properties. The question is, do we have to smoke or inhale, the burn leaf to get those properties?
But here's
we
my
don't tell
thing.
people to smoke opium,
but Kevin,
right?
We give them morphine if they have cancer.
But at least morphine is non-smoked. The dosage.
Kevin, you have cancer, you're dying. Really? You can't smoke a little pot if you want to do that?
I don't care about that.
Yeah,
but that's less than 5% of people.
Okay, but so everyone agrees on that one.
Look, less than 5% of people according to the peer-reviewed studies in California, Colorado, and other states show that less than 5% of people using these dispensaries, having a card, have cancer, HIV, or glaucoma.
But listen, but everybody agrees that those people should have at it with the pot, number one. And number two, research should be free. We should be free to research.
For those people, give them, through a federally mandated program, give them, for example, a mouth spray extract of pot.
Or let them smoke. Who gives a shit? Let them smoke it. I don't care if it makes them feel better.
Whatever, but the question is, how are they going to get it? Where are they going to get it from?
Well, there's plenty in California now. It's quite available here. And
obviously, we shouldn't arrest people with cancer smoking pot. That's not the issue.
That's crazy.
As you said, it's turned into a farce.
Yeah, exactly. So here now is the interesting thing you brought up. We got off this topic a little bit, but you brought up how the alcohol companies actually make money by encouraging binge use.
They do.
So my question is, when cannabis is legal, let's say in Colorado and Washington, what business model gets their hands on it? Is it going to be like a big alcohol company, a big tobacco company, or a big pharma company? And none of those are good, by the way. I think we'd all agree on that. But one of those three is going to prevail in the distribution of pot.
Here, my fear is that it's going to be all three. In researching this book I'm working on, Reefer Sanity, which is out to the publisher today, I went through the tobacco company documents. First of all, we have evidence that that tobacco companies have hired consultants to advise them on the marijuana market. We know that.
So they want in?
Well, the evidence from at least 30 years ago and maybe some evidence from recently that I've heard from people there now says yes, but obviously time will tell. We don't know yet. But it's a fear, and I think it's a legitimate fear. Secondly, you go through these documents, and Drew, I'm sure you've done this. It's crazy to see how for 50 years the tobacco industry lied, bald-faced lies to the American public about the link to cancer and about how they are not marketing to kids. Literally saying, look, we're not marketing to kids, and then having secret memos being uncovered from 2 days after those statements showing what their actual marketing plan to kids would be. I mean, it's incredible. It's enough to just make you, everybody would be an anti-tobacco zealot if you actually went through these documents. The other thing that we know from the alcohol industry is that they not only do they rely, for example, alcohol relies on addiction, as I was saying, for their profits.
Hang on a second. You said abuse. You said abuse, and I think that's more accurate.
Fine. That's fine.
Because the binging, everyone goes out on the football games and binges and consumes a lot. They're not necessarily alcoholics. So let's
that's right.
Let's
well,
agree
80% of their money comes from the 20% of abusers. That's true.
That's fine. And probably of those abusers, probably another 25% are alcoholics. So
that's right.
All right.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
But my point is, they target those people, and we also know that they target minorities, communities of color, and poor. So we have studies showing that liquor outlet densities, for example. Why are liquor outlets 8 times more prevalent in the inner city, in poor communities than in white communities. You know, it's the same thing with lottery dispensaries. Why are there, 3 times as many gambling establishments and lottery dispensaries in a place like Compton versus Bel Air? Not because there isn't money in Bel Air. It's because they target the vulnerable and the people that are, the most susceptible to these addictions. This is my fear about marijuana. And really, my whole thinking comes down to this, Drew. I went to Cal. This Orange County boy went to Berkeley for undergrad, okay? Yeah. And I met a lot of interesting people up there. And I'll tell you, if legalization was about kind of the way you were describing it earlier, it's about people who really just want to get high occasionally, they have a little anxiety, maybe they'll join the drum circle and sing Kumbaya. And
I wanted to get high with this, just listening to this conversation. I know Gary and Chris for sure, but okay, go ahead. Maybe I'm picking it up from you guys. I can see it, you light in your eyes.
You should see what my wife thinks. No, so the point is, if this is about that kind of feeling, I really could care less. But legalization isn't. I'm worried this is about big business. This is about promoting. This is about kids.
I want to break that all down. So what's it going to look like? So is it going to? I keep hearing it's going to be like Big Pharma. That's going to be, and I think that's because everyone knows we hate alcohol business, we hate tobacco business even more. But pharma business, we hate them, but maybe we could redeem them through pot or something. I don't know what people's thinking is.
But it's all speculation, obviously, but maybe marijuana companies will start off and we're seeing, for example, articles in Forbes this week from Yale MBAs that are now flocking to Colorado, Washington, making it a business model.
No, I know.
So, I think this is going to be big business. Which of the 3 models it's going to look like? They're all bad. So pick your poison. But
why do they keep pointing at Big Pharma? They keep saying that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe because of the tie with medicine, with medical, and showing it that way. I'm not sure. I actually think, you could imagine something closer to an alcohol model where this is about fun, this is about promoting, also some niche markets. Like you have a niche sort of wine market, you could have a niche, strands of marijuana market, and then you could, the high-end market, the low-end.
A whole new thing. It'd be like Pinot.
Yeah,
do we really need that? So my question is, we have it already. Do we need it more than we already do? If you want to smoke pot on the weekends, you don't have a hard time finding it. What's the problem? Is my question.
Yeah, and now I think, as I think about it, the only difference really between, I don't know, it's complicated. The only big difference between cannabis and the other products we're talking about is that you could grow your own. Is that still going to be legal too?
That's a great point. So yes, the whole thing about tax revenue sort of gets demolished when you think about the fact how easy it is versus
or will they illegalize that because the companies
those laws already say that that's
think
legal.
About this. These big pharma, these big cannabis companies, whatever they are, it's going to be big cannabis of one sort or another.
Yeah,
going to go to Washington, going to lobby for laws to make it illegal to grow your own. That's what's going to happen.
It's very possible.
That's what has
now
to happen.
You can grow your own.
That's the model.
Colorado,
that's the business model that's coming at us, guys. They better anticipate that.
But imagine but on the other hand, if you can grow your own, well, then there goes your argument about tax revenues.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's why the whole thing breaks down when you grow your own. So that's an interesting little wrinkle in this whole thing. Gary, what's that you're going to say?
No, I was just going to say, that's probably true. That's probably what they'll try. But the reality is you're technically allowed to make your own liquor, but no one does it because it's too big of a pain in the ass.
Yeah, but pot is much easier. Weed is called that for a reason. It grows quickly. It's much easier to grow than making your own alcohol or tobacco.
I don't know. Maybe back in the day, but it can't be very easy to grow the bullshit that they're selling now.
Well, that's a good point.
So fucking crazy.
So that's
Actually,
a good point.
You make a very good point about today's marijuana, and I can't believe I hadn't made it yet. And that is that this is not your Woodstock weed, and that's what I tell parents. They don't realize that. They think this is the 1% to 2% THC they smoked, listening to the Dead. That's not the case at all.
And going back to the big pharma model, they make more and more and more addictive substances, better and better opiates, better and better opioids, and they'll be better and better pot when the money starts flowing in.
Right, and then one of the arguments is one of the arguments is you could regulate the amount of THC. You could say it's only going to be 6%.
Oh, jeez.
Well, then what?
The man gets in again.
Market? Right. What about this black market that you thought you were going to get rid of? Well, no, this is going to be, the black market will be there to fill that demand. So my point is, this is a very complicated issue. It's connected with so many things. Why are we rushing to judgment right now and saying we need to legalize? That's the thing.
Well, at least now we have some study markets to kind of look at what happens, right?
It'll be interesting if the feds allow it. Now, that's the other question. It's still against federal law, so we don't know what's going to happen in that case.
It seems like, so it'll probably go to the Supreme Court if the feds don't allow it, is that right?
We don't know, because then it's like if the feds, it's possible.
Because it seems like this is a Supreme Court that is tilting, or at least nodding towards states' rights.
The problem is the Controlled Substances Act, which is the legislation in question, is unambiguous about this isn't about sort of like, well, is marriage a man and a woman, and it's unambiguous about marijuana being illegal. So,
all right, let's talk about that act. That's the one derived from the Harrison Narcotic Act?
No, that is derivative from the Harris. You know your drug policy history. I love that.
Well, but that was a ridiculous document, right?
Well, I mean, it was 1914.
1914. Yeah, but it stayed in place for 95 years or something,
right?
But
the current legislation's Controlled Substances Act 1970, which has the different.
Hang on a second. Let's remind ourselves. So it was in place for 65 years, 75 years.
1970, whatever that is.
Yeah, so
45 years.
No, from 15 to 70.
Oh,
55 years.
Oh, that yes.
Yeah, 55 years. A horrific document determined our and I bring that up because it set a tone about people's attitudes toward substances that I still have to deal with today when treating drug addicts, which is they're criminals, they're immoral, they're all this crazy shit, and that was the tone of that Narcotic Act. Sorry,
you make a good point, and the science then obviously is different than the science now. But again, it's a Controlled Substances Act today. My point is, I don't see a basis for needing to change that though to make marijuana legal.
Let's talk. What does the act say?
Well, the act basically prohibits the use, sale, possession, anything of marijuana. Now, remember, on the federal level, nobody's ever convicted for use, so that's kind of ignored because that's really a state's issue. Frankly, even on the state level, people are not in state prison for smoking marijuana. It just doesn't happen.
Well, hang on, it happens here.
Well, in California, you get a little citation.
Oh, no, that's right. It's growing. It's growing.
Yeah. Growing is different. But I'm talking about just possession.
But even growing, it's like, what? We need
who are you growing for? I mean, you go down a rabbit hole a little bit. Obviously, it's case by case basis, but
I guess it's the size of the harvest that gets them in trouble. All right, so tell me about the act. So what prompted that act? Why did they even come into that? Why did they revisit the Harrison Narcotic Act?
Well, I think that they realized that, first of all, there was international pressures about this was an exceedingly global world at the time of 1970, and people realizing that the decisions made in one country affect the decisions in another. So there was actually international law put into place, a single convention of the UN in the 60s, and then in 1971, another one. And so U.S. essentially was conforming with international law and saying that, okay, we're going to classify our substances based on severity and medical purposes, and we need some uniformity. It doesn't make sense to have cocaine legal in Florida and illegal in Georgia. We got to have some uniformity, and it affects interstate commerce. It affects people. So
it's really about interstate commerce more than anything. Because it's really about interstate commerce.
It does.
Yeah,
that's why that's why it's been upheld time and time again by multiple courts.
Okay, so it's not about the state's rights to do this, it's about interstate commerce. Okay, because that they've always clamped down on, so that makes sense. And I always wonder why the states couldn't decide for themselves. So.
Well, what states can do, so this is where the states have some wiggle room, and they've been playing with that wiggle room for the last 30 years when it regards to marijuana, is that the states can set their own specific penalties. In other words, there's this legal term called commandeering. That means the feds cannot commandeer a state to put a certain penalty on an offense. So the feds can say, you've got to keep marijuana illegal, and the state has to abide by that. However, the state can say, like California, okay, it's going to be illegal, but you're going to be subject to a $100 citation, which gets expunged a month later. Right. Whereas Texas could say, great, it's illegal, and we're going to give you a 2-year mandatory minimum. I mean, that's the state's rights in this domain. They have to work within some restrictions, but they have some leeway.
All right, here's what I'm going to do, Kevin. I'm going to take a quick break. That's plenty of calls. We got some calls that are interesting. I'm going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I want you to tell me all about Sam. Great. And then we'll take calls, okay?
Thank you.
Take a quick break.
Hi, I'm Larry Miller, but in a way, aren't we all? And this week, on This Week with Larry Miller, we took the start of baseball season, April Fool's Day, and a couple other things and decided that today was the day for me to read Casey at the Bat as the Poetry Corner. It really helped me, and I hope it helps you. We'll see you here.
back with the Dr. Drew podcast. I've got Dr. Kevin Sabet, co-founder with Patrick Kennedy. It's Senator Patrick Kennedy, right? Or former Senator Patrick Kennedy?
Former Congressman. He was the son of Senator Ted Kennedy.
Right. He was what a good guy. Project is SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. LearnAboutSam.org is where you can find out about it. Dr. Sabet was former senior advisor in the White House for the Obama administration, now serves as the director of the Drug Policy Institute at the University of Florida. He is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. His new book will be called Reefer Sanity, be out this summer. And now tell us about SAM.
Well, SAM essentially started the day after the votes for legalization in Washington and Colorado. Patrick Kennedy called me. We had worked together when I was at the White House and he was in Congress. We had actually worked together on things related to recovery and making sure that treatment and prevention were covered under the essential benefits package of Obamacare.
For any addiction.
What's that?
Not just cannabis addiction. But
addiction. No, any addiction, of course. And he called me up and said, Kevin, I'm concerned about what happened. And I said, well, tell me more. He said, well, as somebody in recovery, similar to the story that you just mentioned before, Drew, as someone in recovery, I'm worried about what legalization means for me and my community, this normalization, this commercialization, and how that actually threatens my recovery. And so we started talking, and we both came to the realization that there's this shouting match, false dichotomy in this country about marijuana. It's either incarcerate or legalize. And we wanted to move away from that dichotomy and instead say, you know what, neither of those work. We don't want to do either of them. We want a health-oriented approach. So we're advocating, rather than legalization or incarceration, we're advocating, for example, for health-based intervention. So if you're cited in California for marijuana use and possession, let's do an intervention to see what you need. Let's do an assessment, I should say, to see what you need. Do you need a brief intervention? Do you need more intensive treatment? Do you need a slap on the wrist? Do you need a job? I mean, what is going on in your life? Are there other substances being used? Are there other issues? Really look at this from a holistic point of view.
Kevin, I can't get that for somebody that goes unconscious with a rig in their arm. You know what I mean? I mean, that's
right.
It's a lovely idea, but I can't. It's really hard to. Particularly in California, where there's no money for anything, it's really hard to get that.
It's going to be very difficult, but the point is that's at least what we should aspire to, not incarcerating and not legalizing, which would both be public health, public safety disasters. We don't need either one. And we're on this freight train right now, heading to legalization without really thinking about the consequences, which is what we're trying to get out there.
Is there some place people can reach you directly if they want to continue this conversation?
They can. They can just email me at kevin@learnaboutsam.org.
Kevin@learnaboutsam.org. And again, the website is learnaboutsam.org. All right, let us take some calls here. Let's see. This is, whoop, are you there? Hold on now. There we go. This should be Bill from Michigan. Bill?
Hi, Dr. Drew. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
I called you a couple of weeks ago about opiate addiction, which I thought, but I've been off of it since I talked to you.
Great.
And other than cold sweats and that, I've had no problems. But
Good.
What I was actually calling about today is marijuana addiction.
Mm-hmm. Is that you?
And it's not for me, for a family member.
Okay.
And every day, can't do without it. When they don't have it, they go nuts. And I'm in Michigan, which has legal marijuana for medical use. And that's just a cover for her. I don't know where to go to help her.
Does she want to get better?
No.
Well, then there's not much you can do, unfortunately. It's the nature of these kinds of addictions, as you know. There are, and Kevin, I'll get you in this conversation too, there are schools of thought that would say, well, the way to treat her is to give her more pot and let her have at it. What would you say to that, Kevin?
I don't think so. I don't think you give an alcoholic more alcohol. I don't think you give a pot addict more marijuana.
We give opiate addicts more opiates. We sure do that
these days. A different way to stabilize them so they're not going out and getting heroin, giving methadone. It gets slippery. I'll give you that. It gets slippery, but I would say that I'm not sure if I agree with the fact that you have to always be ready for it. I mean, drug courts show you don't have to be ready for it. You can get off of a substance if you have an incentive to get off with it. In that case, it's a short, quick jail stay if you don't test clean. So I'm not sure about. I mean, obviously that's optimal, but I don't think in every case you have to be 100% ready to get off of it in order to stop.
Well, that's true. If you create consequences, magically you'll create motivation. But let's hear about this woman and what have the consequences been for her? Why are you concerned, Bill?
Well, the cost for one.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. $200-300 every couple of days.
Okay.
And her attitude towards everything is all revolves around getting that, finding it.
So the preoccupations with using and finding and procuring.
Yes.
Is she irritable, depressed, unable to function in some way?
Both.
Yeah.
She's on Xanax and
well, I would argue.
I believe.
What else?
Another depression medication, Zoloft.
Okay, so as is often the case, Kevin, here we have Xanax and cannabis.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, Xanax is going to be harder to get off of.
Sure.
She needs a more global treatment of her addiction because
No
stopping
doubt
the
about
pot is not going to stop the problem here. And that's what I think a lot of people would argue. It's like, well, there's always something else involved. And that's true. A lot of cannabis addicts, by the time they get to treatment, have something else on board. They're doing other stuff. That doesn't mean – well, so what I hate this conversation, but let's do it. The whole gateway thing. Let me tell you my opinion. My opinion is it is not a gateway drug.
Okay.
However, everyone that gets addicted to cannabis eventually, and again, it exists. Sorry, guys, I've treated it a million times, so please don't argue that cannabis addiction not addicting or addicting. It exists. Just accept it. It's rare. It's not rare. It's uncommon, but when it happens, it's brutal.
You got it.
And there's Marijuana Anonymous. You can walk into any Marijuana Anonymous meeting and meet a whole bunch of guys with that condition, and they'll tell you about the story. And the stories are all the same. They love it. And once you love something, that's all you think about from then on. And you'll use every day from then on somewhere between 1 and 20 or 30 years. And somewhere down the line, the effectiveness wears off. It sort of wears off. Now, some guys perpetuate their relationship with it by backing off and playing with that because they realize it's not working so well anymore. I'll get stronger stuff. But eventually, it just doesn't work. So it's really not a gateway. It's not like, well, I'm going to smoke pot, then I'm going to use heroin. If the pot had kept working, most of my patients that go on to other stuff wouldn't have gone on to other stuff because they love the pot. So it's not a gateway so much as, if people realize they had a problem when they were strung out on it, well, it's too strong a word, when they're compulsed with it, they wouldn't go on to anything else. So.
Yeah, when you look at the data, I mean, the bottom line is 99% of people who ever use marijuana do not go onto other substances. But those who have gone onto other substances, 99% of them have started with marijuana.
No, again,
the question is
99% sounds like too many. I would say more like 60%.
I would say the vast majority. Let's say over 90% of cocaine users have used marijuana. No, amphetamine users often are the start of pot, but not alcoholics necessarily. No.
And not opiate users. Cocaine,
I was
maybe.
definitely omitting alcoholics and nicotine, but you're probably right to segment, to separate that. But my point is, what is the question isn't so much does marijuana precede other illicits, because it often does. The question is, why does it precede? That's the interesting question.
Well,
and we don't know why. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it could. As you sort of said, people, I think you were saying, right, people maybe want to search for a new high. They want.
Well, no. Why they go on? No, it stops working. They literally get increasingly depressed and irritable, and the drug they love is letting them down. So they escalate the use and the potency and that kind of stuff, and that accelerates the decline.
Yeah,
and that's when you start looking for something else. I mean, I see this over and over again.
Other people have said it's only because when you go down the path of using pot, you're sort of in contact with people who use other drugs and sell other drugs.
Well, maybe that's why when they start thinking about other things, or maybe people that sell other drugs know that happens eventually. I don't know.
The gateway thing is not something I'm stuck on. I basically say, look, in and of itself, today's pot, which is 10% or more THC, can be extremely dangerous for people. In and of itself, it's a problem. It can be a health problem for people. So, I don't even go there.
Right.
Much with
okay, fair enough. And let's get off of that. You're right. It's a waste of time to argue about that. It's just, who cares? All right, let's take another call from Diane. Diane calling from Maryland. What's up, Diane?
Hi, how are you, Dr. Drew?
I'm great. How are you?
Fine. I have a question. I have cataracts, and every time I say this, people say, you need to smoke some da-da-da-da, you need to smoke some pot, you need to go do this. So is there any correlation between helping the cataracts and medical marijuana, if we're calling it that?
I'm getting some text here. I was just looking at it real quick. Your question is, can medical marijuana treat cataracts? Is that the question?
Yes.
Not that I'm aware of. I've never heard of anything.
No.
Yeah, no one's ever claimed that, to my knowledge.
No, it can't. And in fact, the ophthalmology associations and the eye groups recommend against using marijuana for people with eye problems. So that's kind of one of these urban myths that's out there that, cataracts, glaucoma, etc.
Well, I don't think people know the difference between cataracts and glaucoma. That's probably why that happens.
Maybe.
I mean, cataracts, Diane, cataracts are easily treated with a surgery. Boom, outpatient, you're done. They're over, and you get a new lens in, and that's it, you're done. That has nothing to do with smoking pot. And it's covered by insurances and things. Just get that done, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, now, let's talk about cannabis and glaucoma. My thing about cannabis, glaucoma, cannabis and seizures, before you get to cannabis, there's 10 other really good pharmaceuticals.
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and but people don't trust pharmaceuticals, or they'd rather trust. It's a weird kind of thing people have with that.
It is weird. It's just like people's baggage with marijuana policy because of what they experienced 40 years ago with their friend with long hair being arrested, at the whatever. I mean, people bring all of this sort of all these images with this. You're exactly right. And again, with glaucoma, the American, the associations that lobby for people with glaucoma do not support medical marijuana, and nor do the doctors. So the seizures thing is interesting because we know that there are elements and this is what I was getting at earlier, there are components of marijuana that do not get you high that have shown to have anti-seizure, anti-spasticity properties. I'm talking mainly about CBD, right? Cannabidiol. And my point is, let's get the cannabidiol from the marijuana plant, put it into a mouth spray or a patch or some kind of thing that we can do, which we can do. There is actually a mouth spray out there today called Sativex, which has CBD in it. But let's get that out to people, and great, that's fine. Have them use it. That's very different, though, than sending somebody to a dispensary, in a strip mall and saying, choose your bud and that you have to smoke or vaporize.
That's what's interesting. I've almost never encountered somebody who has asked for marijuana from me for medical purposes that wasn't a marijuana addict.
Yeah.
And I've just never had that. So they're really, it may exist. I've just never had it myself. And I have recommended people to go have at it, too. I think that's great if they have some sort of if they have some sort of terminal illness. And or whatever, horrible thing, and they're not interested in treatment, and I have at it. That's not my thing at all, is to, tell people how to live their life. I'm interested in what's medically...
giving them the best treatment that's possible.
Good treatment, what's medically right.
Right. Oftentimes there's 10 other drugs before you want to even get to marijuana.
Right. Well, that's fascinating to me. This woman with cataracts being told to smoke pot. There's just nothing.
That's crazy.
Meantime, she can't drive a car, and she could have her cataracts out in an afternoon.
Well, exactly
Kevin, I've got to say farewell to you. Don't play the music yet because I'm not quite done. I got a bunch of stuff to read here. And what I've mostly concluded from our conversation, Kevin, is that we need to increase the taxation on alcohol by 10 times. That's the takeaway for me. That's absolutely a very good takeaway. Categorically what I'm clear on. We're not taxing alcohol enough. I saw it work in Utah. I think we need to tax it more. And the other thing is, first of all, I admire and respect and appreciate your thoughtfulness and your willingness to really continue to attack this conversation. I personally, Kevin, do not have the energy for it. God bless you for it, because it's an energy consuming phenomenon, and I'd rather get on myself to stuff where I feel like...
That's why you make the big bucks.
That's right. That's right. I avoid the really tough stuff. Let's leave that to Kevin.
I need to follow that path.
But I hope you'll come back and continue to discuss this as the Colorado and Washington stories unfold, because that's where we're really going to figure this out. Do you think... My last question to you is, do you think by the time that the federal issues will be delayed long enough for us to collect the data to adequately understand what went on in Colorado and Washington?
Well, we don't know, because we could imagine the effects won't even be seen for another 5 to 10 years. I mean, in terms of by the time the normalization sets in, kids growing up who didn't know a time when marijuana was illegal now grow up in a time when it's legal. It's really complicated. We just don't know right now.
Well,
I wish I had a better answer.
I've got my sights fixed on those states. I'm interested to see how it plays out. And again, Dr. Kevin Sabet is co-founder with Patrick Kennedy, former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, Project SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. LearnAboutSam.org is the website. He is a former senior advisor to the White House for the Obama administration, serves now as the director of the Drug Policy Institute at the University of Florida. New book, Reefer Sanity. I assume all this stuff will be laid out in that book, yes?
It will be, yes.
Kevin at learnaboutsam.org is where they can email you, yes?
You got it. Thank you so much.
And KevinSabet.com is the website, and at Kevin Sabet, S-A-B-E-T, is his Twitter handle. Dr. Kevin Sabet, thank you so much for joining us.
No, it's an honor and pleasure to be on, Drew. Thank you.
That does it. No doubt we'll have you back in soon. All right, guys, that about does it. Thank you for calling, those of you that did. Reminder that please click through on the Amazon banner there to keep the pirate ship afloat. I just spent some time with Mr. Carolla, and he was hammering me about all his business, his needs to keep the pirate ship going. So I want to do my part. If you guys will do yours, I'll keep podcasting. Thank you all for joining me. See you next time.